Okay, this video is for projectile motion and for quadratic equation area problems. So projectile motion can be represented using one of these parabolas. So here's kind of what the different pieces of the parabola mean. So at the vertex, the x value is when the object is at its highest point. Okay, and so the y value, so remember this vertex is going to be an ordered pair, x comma y. The y value is how high does it get? How high off the ground will it get? The y-intercept is how high off the ground the object started. And then you've got your two x-intercepts or your two zeros. So if it's a negative intercept, then that one gets thrown out for being too negative. If it's a positive zero, this is when the object hits the ground or how long the object is in the air. And so if you want to know how high an object is after a certain amount of seconds, you can plug that value into x in the graph's equation. Now, the other thing are these area problems for quadratic equations. So it says, given the diagram below, find the value of x if the rectangle is 78 square meters. So we know that area is length times width. And so we would do x times x plus 7. And so that's the formula. And we know that that is going to equal, that length times width is going to equal 78. And so we can break this down. So we have to distribute the x across everything inside the parentheses. So x times x is x squared. X times 7 would be plus 7x. And then that's going to equal 78. If I want to make it a quadratic, I need to move the 78. So I would subtract the 78 from both sides. And so now it's going to equal 0. And so now I can solve this, and there's different ways that you can solve this. You can use the quadratic formula. You can factor it, whatever works best for you. So the quadratic formula is negative b. Give me just a second. Oh, sorry, guys. Okay. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and then all of that's divided by 2a. And so I can use that here. So negative b would be negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 7 squared minus 4 times a times c divided by 2 times a. All right, so if I do this part first, 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 78, I get 361. And so the square root of 361 is 19. So I would have negative 7 plus or minus 19 divided by 2. And so then you're going to do this twice. So negative 7 plus 19, and then divide by 2, and then negative 7 minus 19, and divide by 2. So your two answers are 6 and negative. You can see here 6 and negative 13. So x equals 6 and x equals negative 13. We're going to throw this one out, though, because we cannot have a negative measurement. This would mean that this side measures negative 13 meters, and we know that we can't do any measurements in negatives. So 6 is the only possible answer here. All right, this one is a word problem. It says the dimensions of a rectangle can be expressed as x plus 3 and x minus 8. If the area of the rectangle is 60 square inches, what is the value of x? And so here we would have x plus 3 and x minus 8, because length times width equals area, so that's going to equal 60. If I use FOIL and I factor this out, x times x is x squared, x times negative 8 is minus 8x, 3 times x is positive 3x, and then 3 times a negative 8 is negative 24, and that equals 60. I want 0 over here, so I'm going to subtract 60 from both sides, and I'm going to combine these like terms. So I would have x squared minus 5x, and then minus 84, and that equals 0. So now to solve it, we do negative b, so negative 5 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, and all of that is divided by 2 times a. So again, that's the quadratic formula. So I'm going to do just what's underneath here. So negative 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 84 gives me 361 again. And the square root of 361 is 19. So a negative 5 is 5 plus or minus 19 divided by 2. So 5 plus, sorry guys, 5 plus 19 divided by 2, and then 5 minus 19 divided by 2. So I would get x equals 12 and x equals negative 7. I throw out the negative value because I can't have a negative measurement. So my solution there, the value of x is 12. Okay, so the back side or the inside of this one is more of the projectile motion. So it says a soccer ball is kicked from the ground with an initial upward velocity of 90 feet per second. The equation h equals negative 16t squared plus 90t gives the height of the ball after t seconds. Find the maximum height of the ball. So we're going to find the vertex. So if you remember, x equals negative b divided by 2a. So we're going to change this because x is now t, and b is, let's see, negative 90. So we do negative 90 divided by 2 times negative 16. So negative 90 divided by 2 times negative 16 gives me let's round it, 2.81. Actually, I'm going to use the whole thing because I like my answers to be accurate. So that is the x value of my vertex. So this is the x. To find the y, or sorry, this is the t. So to find h, or the y, I would plug this value into my equation. And so I have negative 16 squared plus 90. And I get 126, and this one will round. H equals 126.56. And so the maximum height that it's going to get, remember, is this value. So if you remember looking at the front of your vertex, the y value of your vertex is how high the object gets. So this is the max height. And it says, how many seconds will it take for the ball to reach the ground? So now we're going to solve this quadratic. So negative 16t squared plus 90t equals 0. We are going to use the quadratic formula. So negative b, so negative 90 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a, and then I don't have a c, so I'm going to use a 0, and then divided by 2 times a. All right, so I know automatically if I multiply by 0, that is going to cancel out. And so the other neat little trick here, so I would be left with the square root of 90 squared. Well, these two cancel each other. A square root sign and an exponent of 2 are going to cancel. So what I'm left with is negative 90 plus or minus 90 divided by negative 32. Okay, so negative 90 plus 90 divided by negative 32, or negative 90 minus 90 divided by negative 32. And so what I want to know, again, let's look at what the question's asking. How long does it take for the ball to reach the ground? Well, 0 is not a realistic answer. It's not going to take 0 seconds because we do know that it went up to the air. So the only valid answer here, so x equals 0 is not a valid answer, but x equals 5.625. That is my valid answer for that one, and that is seconds. All right, an apple is launched directly upward at 64 feet per second from a platform 80 feet high. The equation is negative 16 squared plus 64t plus 80. So I need to find the vertex. That's going to give me the maximum. So I do negative b divided by 2a. So 64 divided by 2 times negative 16. And that is going to give me an x value or t value, I'm sorry, of 2. This is my t. And so I'm going to plug this into here. So negative 16, 2 squared. And so when I solve that one, I get 144. And so this is my height, and that's what I want, the max height. So 144 feet would be your answer there. And then it says, how many seconds will it take for the apple to reach the ground? And so we're going to use the quadratic formula. So t is going to equal negative b, so negative 64 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, and then divided by 2 times a. Okay, so let's do this part first. 64 squared minus 4 times negative 16 times 80. That gives me 9,216. So the square root of that is 96. So here I would have negative 64 plus or minus 96 divided by negative 32. So negative 64 plus 96 divided by negative 32. And then negative 64 minus 96 divided by negative 32. So x can either equal 1 or x can equal 5. Well, we cannot have a negative number of minutes. And so there's no such thing as negative 1 second. So t is going to equal 5 seconds. All right, in science class, the students were asked to create a container to hold an egg. They would then drop this container from a window 25 feet above the ground. The equation, h equals negative 16t squared plus 25, gives the container's height, h, after t seconds. So find the height of the container, so negative b divided by 2a. So I don't have a b. And so anytime that we try to divide 0, we're going to get a 0. And so h is going to equal negative 16 times 0 squared plus 25. So this is going to equal 25. That is going to be the max height. All right, and then so now we're going to solve this. And so negative b, which is a 0, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c divided by 2 times a. Okay, so now we have 0 minus 4 times negative 16 times, oh, not negative 25, sorry. So 1600, the square root of 1600 is 40. So now I have 0 plus or minus 40 divided by a negative 32, which means I'm either going to have 40 divided by negative 32 or 40 or negative 40 divided by negative 32. So again, x is either going to equal negative 1.25 or x is going to equal 1.25. We cannot have a negative amount of seconds, so t is going to equal 1.25 seconds. All right, a penny is dropped off the Empire State Building, which is 1,250 feet tall. If the penny's pathway can be modeled by the equation h equals negative 16 t squared plus 1250, how long would it take for the penny to strike a 6-foot tall person? So this one is a little bit different. So what I've got here is my penny has to strike a person that is 6 feet tall. So I'm going to set my equation here equal to 6, but then I want to go ahead, let's use the squares method on this. So I'm going to subtract 1250 from both sides. So here I would have, let me see, negative 16t squared equals negative 1,244. I've got to drop the negative. So what this is being multiplied by -1. So I'm going to divide by -1, and that's going to get rid of the negative on both sides for me. And then we've got to, oh, I guess we could have just divided by -16. I'm sorry, guys. So 1,244 divided by 16, what it's going to come down to is t squared equals 77.75. And so remember, from here, we square root both sides. This is going to cancel. And so the square root of 77.75 is about let's say 8.82. And remember, it's positive minus 8.82. But again, time cannot be negative. So our time is going to be equal to positive 8.82 seconds. So that's it for this video.